Good evening. I'm Judy Woodruff on the NewsHour this Wednesday. The lead story, it's tax filing day, and Jeffrey Brown talks with the commissioner of the IRS. Then the other news of the day, Paul Salmon looks at the paradox of thrift. A U.S.-Mexico border czar is appointed. Ray Suarez gets reaction to the uptick in violence in the area. Fred DeSam Lazaro reports from Nigeria on food scarcity in a country that once was a leading agricultural exporter. And after a week of violence, the political standoff in Thailand.
Major funding for the NewsHour with Jim Lehrer is provided by...
Wow, that's it?
It's got purples and greens.
It looks very complicated.
It looks like a little solar panel.
This is what makes my computer tick, this little thing.
This really allows me to connect with my family in Beijing.
I couldn't teach my class without this.
This is the thing that lets me make movies.
Well, I think that's pretty fantastic that this little thing makes so much possible.
The world is changing, and how we use energy today cannot be how we use it tomorrow. There is no one solution. It's not simply more oil, more renewables, or being more efficient. It's all of it. Our way of life depends on developing all forms of energy and to use less of it. It's time to put our differences aside. Will you be part of the solution? Chevron, human energy.
Grant Thornton.
And by the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, supporting science, technology, and improved economic performance and financial literacy in the 21st century.
And with the ongoing support of these institutions and foundations. And
this program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Our lead story, this is tax day, April 15th, the last day to file tax returns or extensions without incurring penalties. It's also been a day for protesters to demand lower taxes and smaller government, and for President Obama to speak up about his tax policies. NewsHour correspondent Kwame Holman has our report.
USA! USA! The rallies, dubbed Tea Parties, generally were organized by conservatives and held nationwide. In the rainy District of Columbia, scores of protesters gathered just steps from the White House to make their sentiments known. Many at the rallies said they were nonpartisan, as in New Haven, Connecticut.
We are not mad at Republicans or Democrats. It's, to us, not a Republican or Democrat thing. It's politicians.
That was echoed in Florida, where groups carried signs through the streets to denounce big government spending.
Our children are going to be paying enormous taxes to pay off this debt.
And in Cincinnati, Ohio, even dogs carried protest signs. The gatherings were modeled on the Boston Tea Party in 1773, when American colonists dumped highly taxed British tea into Boston Harbor. And the modern-day tea parties seem to echo today at the highest levels.
I know that April 15th is not exactly everyone's favorite date on the calendar.
President Obama used his own tax event to highlight his tax reforms. He said they're designed to help those hardest hit by the recession, working families.
This tax cut will reach 120 million families and put $120 billion directly into their pockets. And it includes the most American workers ever to get a tax cut. This is going to boost demand, and it will save or create over 500,000 jobs. And that's
the president also vowed again to revamp the tax code.
It's going to take time to undo the damage of years of carve-outs and loopholes, but I want every American to know that we will rewrite the tax code so that it puts your interests over any special interests. And we'll make it easier, quicker, and less expensive for you to file a return so that April 15th is not a date that is approached with dread every year.
For many taxpayers, filing already is quicker, at least, as more and more file returns online.
Late today, the Obamas released their joint tax return for 2008. They reported making $2.7 million last year, nearly all of it from the president's book royalties. That was down from more than $4 million the year before. Now, Jeffrey Brown has more about the approach the IRS is taking this tax season in the midst of a major recession.
And joining me for that is Douglas Schulman, Commissioner of the Internal Revenue Service. Appointed in 2008, he's in his second year of a 5-year term. Welcome to you. Those tax protests we saw, or the fact that we're in a recession, do these things show up in a discernible way yet in terms of collection, either people not paying or procrastinating more?
Well, I don't think the tax protests show up, but we're clearly in a difficult economy. There's people who are trying to figure out whether to pay their medical bill, their rent, their heat, or pay their tax bill. And so we're seeing a lot more taxpayers in difficult times, and we're here to work with them.
Well, what are you announced during the tax season that you would work with people. What has that meant? What have you done differently?
Well, there's two things I would mention. One is there's the Recovery Act, and the Recovery Act has a number of tax provisions. The president has asked every agency to execute that very well and to make sure we're working with American taxpayers. And so the Make Work Pay credit, we're making sure there's more money in Americans' paychecks. Net operating loss carrybacks, if you're a small business and you paid taxes in the past, you can actually get a refund this year if you have a loss. The COBRA provisions, if you've lost your job, the government will actually subsidize health insurance. So we're making sure we're staffed up and we execute that well. We're also have set up some special programs at the IRS. And the way to think about this is we've given our frontline employees, those who actually deal with taxpayers every day, more flexibility to work through issues like a missed payment if someone's on a payment plan, to suspend collection if somebody's trying to get their finances in order, to actually remove a tax lien if someone's trying to sell their house and their mortgage is upside down. And so we've given people more flexibility, given our employees more flexibility to work with the American people.
And has there been a measurable response from people who in need?
Well, it's still early in the filing season for us because we're getting returns in and we're going to process it through. I've gotten a lot of reports from our employees that people have asked for special payment plans, that people have been quite appreciative. And so we'll know more later in the year, but anecdotally, people have been quite appreciative.
Of course, this doesn't mean a free ride for anybody. You're saying if you're in trouble, in real financial need, you have to get in touch with the IRS and try to take some action. Maybe something can be worked out.
Yeah, we have to walk a very fine line this year, Jeff. In one respect, the American people are counting on their government to get them out of this recession. So we actually need to collect the money it takes to fund the government.
You feel more pressure now than ever, I suppose.
Well, what we need to do is collect the money to fund the government. And so if you can pay, you need to pay, and we need to have enforcement programs and service programs. But we also need to understand taxpayers, take each one as they come. And if someone's in real dire straits and they literally can't meet basic living expenses, then we're here to work with them.
All right, now, speaking of the collection side, one measure that you've been taking is on the tax haven, so-called. How big a problem is that for tax collection?
Yeah, we've been very focused on offshore tax evasion, wealthy individuals parking assets overseas and then not paying the taxes that they owe. There's a lot of estimates out there. None of them are very reliable. It's definitely a multi-billion-dollar problem, and it's one that we're going to be focused on, Jeff, as a fundamental matter of fairness. In this tough economy where people are trying to pay for groceries and are struggling to meet bills, they need to know that this government, this administration, is going to make sure that people who have the wealth to park assets overseas are going to pay their taxes.
So you've offered what sounds like a kind of a limited amnesty. Explain what you're doing.
Well, we have settlement programs that we run all the time because our main goal is to get people in the system for the long term. And so we have a carrot and a stick approach. The stick is we beefed up our enforcement. The president has committed to having a robust enforcement budget for the IRS and international initiatives. We've had some very public prosecutions. We've made it clear that if you're hiding assets, we're going to come try to find you, and if we find you, we're not going to hesitate putting you in jail. The carrot is we've told people if they come in, pay the taxes they owe, pay a hefty penalty, they can avoid going to jail. And so we just announced this program a couple of weeks ago. We've seen some response, and we expect to see quite a bit more.
Do you need the carrot? I mean, given that these are no doubt wealthier people who are using tax havens, is this a sign that you don't have, you can't otherwise go after them? I mean, why not go after them with the full force of the law? Why offer any carrot?
Well, we're certainly going after people with the full force of the law. But anytime you run a big enforcement agency, you're trying to get the balance right. And my real goal is to get people into the system. So if people have been out of the system and they're hiding their assets, if they come in truly voluntarily and they pay their back taxes and they pay a substantial penalty, that'll free up resources so we can continue to pursue enforcement and service programs in other places. And so our goal is to get people in, get them to pay their taxes, and get them right with the government.
There has been a lot of talk, as you know, it's been in the spotlight for a while now, internationally, the G20 meeting recently. This was an important focus there. But I think people always have the sense that wealthy people and corporations are always a step ahead of the law. There's always loopholes. Is it your sense that, in fact, tax haven countries, tax haven banks are getting the message and that you can actually reach them in a way you couldn't before?
Yeah, we've seen some tangible progress. One, you mentioned the G20. I think countries are cooperating more than ever before. I have dialogue with my counterparts. Obviously, the Treasury Secretary has dialogue with his counterparts, and the President does as well. You've seen some real progress in the last even few weeks. There's some countries that have bank secrecy laws that have announced that they're going to try to change those laws legislatively in their country. People have announced that they're going to abide by international treaties of information exchange with the IRS. You've seen a number of banks announcing that they're going to exit the business of soliciting U.S. customers to park their assets overseas. And so I think we're seeing some real tangible results, and we're going to continue to beef up our programs and go after people.
All right, one last thing I have to ask you briefly. President Obama said today that he would like to see the tax code simplified. We have heard that from many presidents. And I think on a day like today, when everybody has to put in their form, we know what that means, how complicated this system has become. Do you think there is a real chance, or why is it so difficult? Is there a real chance to actually simplify the tax code?
Well, my favorite fact is that the tax code is 4 times as long as War and Peace. It's clearly incredibly complex. Simplifying it is difficult. This president is committed to trying to do so. What I will tell you, at the IRS, we recognize it's difficult, and so we're going to run service and education programs for people wrestling with that code, especially average, everyday Americans who have to pay money to have their taxes prepared. We're going to try to make it as easy and simple for them to prepare their returns, but we're also going to run tough enforcement programs for those who are trying to evade the law.
All right, Douglas Schulman, IRS Commissioner. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
In other news, stocks climbed on new hopes the recession is moderating. That followed upbeat reports from Procter & Gamble and American Express. The Dow Jones Industrial Average gained 109 points to close above 80.29. The Nasdaq rose 1 point to close above 16.26. The U.S. Treasury has selected 6 companies to begin a program aimed at fighting foreclosures. They will qualify for nearly $10 billion. Out of $50 billion set aside for the effort. The 6 include such well-known names as Chase Home Finance, Wells Fargo, and Citi Mortgage. Pirates from Somalia threaten to hijack more U.S. ships today and to slaughter any Americans they find. That's after U.S. sharpshooters killed 3 pirates and rescued an American ship captain on Sunday. Late Tuesday, another American freighter, the Liberty Sun, seen in this file photograph, was attacked. It was damaged but escaped. In Washington today, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton announced efforts to track and freeze the pirates' assets.
The pirates are buying more and more sophisticated equipment. They're buying faster and more capable vessels. They are clearly using their ransom money for their benefit. Take, for example, the attempt to buy more sophisticated vessels. You know, there are ways to crack down on companies that would do business with pirates.
Also today, the French Navy raided a pirate supply ship off the coast of Kenya. 11 men were detained. North Korea made more moves today to restart its nuclear program, expelling a group of U.S. experts. They had been monitoring work to dismantle the North's main nuclear complex at Yongbyon. It is capable of producing weapons-grade plutonium. Yesterday, 4 UN inspectors were ordered out. They removed seals and turned off cameras before departing. Iran will offer ideas on breaking the deadlock over its nuclear program. President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad announced it on a speech shown on Iranian state television. He said, quote, "Circumstances have changed."
We are preparing a new package. Once it becomes ready, we will present that package to you. It is a package that constitutes peace and justice throughout the globe and also respects other nations' rights and guarantees participation of all countries and nations in solving international problems.
Secretary of State Clinton today welcomed a dialogue, but she insisted that the Obama administration has not dropped demands that Iran stop enriching uranium. In Iraq, a car bomb killed 11 government security guards and wounded 20 others. It happened in Kirkuk, the center of Iraq's northern oil fields. The target was a convoy of guards working for a state-owned gas company. There was no immediate claim of responsibility. In Kabul, Afghanistan, dozens of young women's rights activists today were challenged by larger crowds made up of men and women who screamed and threw stones at them. The young women marched under heavy security. They opposed a new law that lets a husband demand sexual relations from his wife every 4 days. The law applies to Shiite Muslims, and it has sparked international opposition. In Colombia, police have captured that country's most wanted drug lord. Daniel Rendon Herrera, known as Don Mario, was nabbed in the country's north. He's accused of offering a $1,000 bounty for every police officer his gunmen kill. U.S. officials want him to stand trial in New York on drug trafficking charges. And still to come on the NewsHour tonight, the savings dilemma, troubles along the border, food insecurity, and the political standoff in Thailand. Economics correspondent Paul Salman explores a particularly vexing question for Americans at the moment. You might call it the paradox of thrift.
The American savings rate is rising fast, from an abysmal near zero or below just a few years ago, up past 4% in January and February. Well, it's about time, you might think. And yet, by definition, saving means not spending. And spending is what we supposedly need right now. Need desperately. So, to save or not to save? That is the question. It's a debate that last raged during the Great Depression, when the English economist John Maynard Keynes coined a phrase again in vogue: the paradox of thrift. But what does it mean, we asked one of our favorite living English economists, MIT's Simon Johnson.
Paradox of thrift is the idea that everyone tries to increase their savings, so desired savings goes up, thrift being savings, but the act of trying to save pulls down the entire economy, gives you a big recession or maybe even a depression, and total savings don't go up, maybe they even go down. So everyone trying to save leads to a big slowdown and less savings. That's a paradox.
As it happens, a very old paradox. Back in the 1700s, at the dawn of the market system, when Handel was writing this music for England's King George I, Bernard Mandeville was scandalizing London with this satire in verse, The Grumbling Hive. The poem, a fable about bees, was meant as a diatribe against virtue and especially saving. Once upon a time, a beehive hummed, Mandeville wrote, by splurging, borrowing, cheating.
Every part was full of vice, yet the whole mass a paradise.
Mandeville's point, the hive prospered not despite the vice, but because of it. Now, at this very moment in English history, the economy of Mandeville's London was being visually mocked by English artist William Hogarth. So, to continue with Hogarth's pictures and Mandeville's words, the bees, when they spent on
luxury, employed 1 million of the poor. Envy itself and vanity were ministers of industry.
In other words, keeping up with the Joneses made everyone better off. But what if both we and the Joneses decide to cut back?
We employ a lot of people through the things we buy, and we have them come, clean our cars, or we ask them to cook meals for us in a restaurant rather than cooking at home. And that economy, those interactions, that market is all about going out and spending. If you decide to stay home and not spend one weekend, that's totally fine. The movie industry will probably hardly notice. But if everybody decides that movies are an unbearable luxury, or even something not virtuous, that would be even worse. Then the movie industry would collapse.
If everybody saves, that is. But in the 1700s, savings was a virtue.
If you would be wealthy, think of saving more than getting.
I once lunched with a Ben Franklin reenactor who indulged me with one of the 1700s most famous sound bites.
Penny saved is a penny earned.
But enough living history. Let's return to what TV folks actually call B-roll, the video that covers narration. Mandeville's bees thrived as spendthrifts, and by neglecting the words of the most famous English bard, neither a borrower nor a lender be. Thrived by borrowing and spending, that is, until Ben Franklin's so-called Protestant ethic came to infect the hive. Imagine that Mandeville's bees are downshifting to thrift, beginning ever so virtuously to
sell stately horses by whole sets, and country houses to pay debts. Vain cost is shunned as much as fraud. They have no forces kept abroad.
In other words, the bees were saving instead of borrowing and spending. Just what some, like pension expert Dallas Salisbury, advocate now.
Saving aggressively is probably at the individual level and the household level more clearly important and necessary than at any time in the last several decades.
But doesn't saving aggressively aggravate the downturn? As the savings rate climbed in the last quarter of 2008, the economy shrank by 6%. If we'd returned to the average savings rate that prevailed back in the 1970s, 10%, the economy would have shrunk by double digits, making it an official depression. This is just what happened to the busy bees in Mandeville's satire. The newfound thrift of the once profligate arthropods brought the bees to their knees. And
multitudes that lived on them were daily forced to do the same. In vain to other trades they'd fly. The price of land and houses falls. Artificers are not employed.
The point of the fable, saving created the kind of vicious spiral we're seeing today. So in the end, are people saving too aggressively? Dallas Salisbury's still pushing thrift. Paradox or no?
You'd better take care of your own situation. You better focus on you. You'd better be more concerned about your family's financial situation and not be doing things that are somehow maybe going to be terrible for you, even if they're good for the country.
As personal finance advice, even Simon Johnson doesn't really disagree.
Some people have too much debt, and some people have to cut back, particularly because it's becoming harder and harder to roll over your debt. Credit card debt for many people has become more expensive. Now, there are other people in the economy who don't face those kinds of constraints. Don't panic. Don't think you've got to pay off all your debts. That would not be appropriate in these circumstances.
Because it would make things worse, warned Bernard Mandeville, and then John Maynard Keynes, who cited Mandeville in his arguments of the 1930s, fearing the consequences of a sudden surge in saving. It's the same thing some people worry about today, the reappearance of the paradox of thrift.
Now, escalating violence on the border with Mexico. Ray Suarez has that story.
Given the recent spate of drug cartel violence along the U.S.-Mexican border and the hundreds of thousands of people who try to enter the U.S. illegally each year through the Southwest, the Obama administration has decided to bring in some extra help, a so-called border czar. Homeland Security Secretary Janet Napolitano named former federal prosecutor Alan Burson to the post today in El Paso, Texas. From 1993 to 1998, Burson led the government's crackdown on illegal immigration, along the California-Mexico border. During his last 3 years at the Justice Department, he also served as the Southwest Border Representative for the Attorney General. Burson's most immediate challenge is likely to be a drug war that's grown increasingly violent, with more than 6,300 killed in Mexico just last year. Napolitano said confronting the drug war was vital to the safety of the American people as well.
The rest of the United States has a stake in this, too. That the drugs that come across an unsecure border infiltrate our neighborhoods and communities across this country. There's no state of this country that does not have a stake in this border.
The drug violence is likely to be a topic of discussion tomorrow when President Obama meets with Mexican President Felipe Calderon in Mexico City. To explore that challenge and more, we turn to David Shirk, director of the Trans-Border Institute at the University of San Diego, and Sam Quinones, author of the book True Tales from Another Mexico. He's been covering this story for the Los Angeles Times. Professor Shirk, many of the functions that are being talked about with this new job already exist with the Drug Enforcement Agency, the Border Patrol, with the Secretary of Homeland Security herself. Why have a border czar?
Well, I think the idea is to try to focus and coordinate efforts on the U.S. side in a way that is often difficult to achieve with individual agencies each doing their own thing.
Alan Burson had a similar job under Attorney General Janet Reno. Will it be different this time?
Well, I think the major difference is in the mid-1990s when the Clinton administration created the border czar position, the emphasis at that time was really on addressing undocumented immigration. Now the set of challenges that people are concerned about the most have to do with drug trafficking and drug cartel-related violence.
Do the Mexicans have a similar job?
Not presently. In the early years of the Fox administration, there was a border czar appointed at that time on the Mexican side. Ironically, we've never had a U.S. border czar or a Mexican border czar at the same time, and it would probably be very helpful for a homologous position to be developed to help Alan Burson in the coordination of U.S. and Mexican agencies.
Sam Quinones, when Americans glance at the television or a newspaper, they hear about violence, they see a very tense video of people shooting at people, but who's fighting who?
Well, in general, there's three things going on. There's wars within certain cartels. They've been fighting among themselves for dominance now that certain capos have been arrested. There's fights between cartels. The Sinaloa cartel and the Gulf cartel primarily have been fighting it out. Lately, the Sinaloa cartel and the Juarez cartel have been battling for the Juarez corridor into the United States. And thirdly, then there's a new actor on the scene, and that is the Mexican government. For a long time, the Mexican government, and I'm talking about in the 1970s and 80s, elements of the Mexican government were involved in kind of facilitating and organizing the drug trade in Mexico. They were very much participants in all this. Now, many years have passed, a lot of change has come to Mexico, so the new government has a totally different attitude now, and they're going after these cartel guys. They're not just going after loads of dope, they're going after guns, money, and the capos themselves. All of this has kind of put pressure on routes into the United States at once that were pretty much established, and this has caused this kind of ferocious, intensely savage kind of violence that you've seen on TV in the last, I would put it actually going back to about 2005 is when this all started.
Sam, last year the United States government announced something called the Merida Initiative, promising about $1.5 billion in security aid for Mexico. Is it very much in evidence as the Calderon government tries to crack down?
Well, no, because I think only part of that, a portion of it, I think it's maybe 15 or 20% of it's been funded yet. So I don't think that has played much of a role. I think that, you know, folks in the U.S. Congress and folks in the Mexican government are hoping that that'll increase over the next few months.
Professor Shirk, the new border czar, Alan Burson, is something of a known quantity in the world of people who watch Mexican-American relations because of the work he did in California on the border during the 1990s. Tell us about Operation Gatekeeper and how it's remembered today.
Well, Operation Gatekeeper, along with Operation Hold the Line and other efforts to concentrate border security resources and clean up the border region has a mixed history. On the one hand, it achieved many of its objectives in terms of making it much more difficult for unwanted elements to cross the border, whether it was undocumented immigrants or criminal agents. Unfortunately, the construction of increased fencing, higher levels of surveillance and patrol along key urban corridors of the border basically pushed many of the undocumented immigrants out to desert and mountain areas and led to much higher levels of death and injury for people crossing the border, moving from double digits to 300-400 people dying every year coming across the border. That legacy of migrant death is something that I think critics of Burson would attribute to him and to the effort to beef up border security.
And Sam, did hardening the California-Mexico border push people to cross into Janet Napolitano's Arizona, where she was the Attorney General?
That's correct. I mean, what it did was restore the rule of law essentially along the San Diego corridor into the United States. That used to be just a totally chaotic place rife with crime, muggings, murders, and so on. But as David Shirk says, rightly so, it pushed everything further east. And so now the big corridor, both for smuggling immigrants as well as for smuggling drugs, is up through from Sonora into Arizona and from there across the country. So that's pretty much the effect that it had.
Let me ask you both before we go. Anytime the United States tries to mount operations in coordination with Mexico, there's often, on the Mexican side of the border, a worry about Mexican sovereignty. What does Mexico want from the U.S., Professor, at this point?
I think that Mexico has been calling for many, many years for greater effort on the part of the United States to control weapons smuggling southbound into Mexico. Gun laws in the United States are very lax compared to the gun laws in Mexico, and there's a perception in Mexico that we're not doing enough to actually control, especially the flow of high-powered weapons into Mexico. The other thing that Mexico often raises is this issue of corruption. Many Mexicans point out that as much corruption as there may be in Mexico, it's difficult to believe that corruption somehow stops at the border and the reach of drug trafficking is somehow constrained by the border. So I think Mexico is also looking for sincere efforts on the part of the United States to identify our responsibility and our contributions to what is a binational problem.
Sam, I got time only for a very quick final thought from you on that question.
I would say simply, though, that the other side of the coin is that the corruption truly is a problem in Mexico. The lack of strong institutions clearly is a problem in Mexico. If Mexico is looking for that from the United States, another thing they might need to do is look to themselves as well. This is definitely a problem down there, and part of what this war is all about as well.
Sam Quinones and Professor Shirk, gentlemen, thank you both.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you.
Now, the growing global problem of food insecurity. Special correspondent Fred DeSam Lazaro has this report from Nigeria.
This busy food market in Mayadua sits just inside Nigeria's northern border. A lot of produce, like these beans, is from neighboring Niger, even though that nation's 13 million people are often on the brink of starvation. The economics are simple. Prices are higher in oil-rich Nigeria. But why is Nigeria even importing food? Agricultural produce used to be its main export. Now it must turn to neighbors to feed its growing population, already Africa's largest at 140 million. Most Nigerians live on farms, but today many, like the extended Usman family, can barely provide for themselves. The rains provided a good crop of sorghum and maize this year, may be enough to get through the dry season. But even as the ladies sing to celebrate a good crop, Ramatu Usman and Aisha Yusuf say each new year brings new uncertainty.
We've had difficult times when rainfall was poor, when we had to rely on leaves and shrubs.
We pluck them, boil them, sprinkle them with salt, sometimes eat them with peanut butter.
Not that the food they enjoy today is either bountiful or balanced. The UN says almost a third of Nigeria's young children are moderately to severely underweight. In this family's main daily meal is a starchy porridge flavored with chilies, dried tomatoes, and monosodium glutamate, or MSG, an additive that mimics the taste of meat. They rarely have the real thing. The few goats and poultry are the savings account, sold to buy clothes or medicine or to pay for a wedding. Much of the blame for the poor state of Nigerian agriculture lies with the successive military dictatorships, which since the 1970s promised but never delivered on grandiose modernization plans. Mohammed Sabo Nanono heads a group of large farmers.
The focus was how to improve farming through a large-scale effort, as well as through the creation of facilities for dry season farming. And this resulted in the construction of several dams in this country and several irrigation schemes.
The Jibia Dam project was one part of the grand plan. Its canal network is supposed to water surrounding fields during the dry season, affording 2 crops a year instead of 1. But much of the network is bone dry.
The water should be gushing through this canal. Instead, there's grass growing in it. The problem is that the electric supply is erratic around here, and there's no diesel to run the pumps. No diesel in one of the world's most energy-rich nations.
A few fields have benefited in Jibia, alongside sloped canals that get water through gravity. But Yusuf Suleiman, a nearby farmer, says many growers have been burned trying to plant dry season crops.
There were times before when people were mobilized, activity took off very well, but unfortunately somewhere in the middle there was a scarcity of water, so some people lose whatever they might have put into place.
Other farmers say they've been crippled by soaring costs of fertilizer, seeds, and especially diesel fuel.
We used to get 5 gallons of diesel for 2 naira. Now it is 180 naira.
In Katsina province, Kabir Abubakar Matazu has seen nothing but losses since buying 1,000 acres in the early 1970s.
70. That is 8 years ago. The aim was to go into mechanized farming, using tractors, etc. But as you can see, they are here lying idle. 1987 was the last time we cultivated the whole farm.
Matazu says the government has done little to assure farmers can recover their costs, let alone make a profit.
There should be some control of price of commodities in the market. Farmers need support from government to find a market that will make it work. As it is, there is no control on prices. One season, the price is very low. Another year, it's very high.
So the farmers are exposed to the vagaries of price volatility. Today, if maize was given more money, people will rush to maize next year. And then the price of maize will collapse.
For decades, the government plan has been to stabilize prices by building a strategic reserve. That would enable it to buy grain and to store or release it into the marketplace to curb wild price swings.
Well, this is the 25,000-ton strategic grain reserve for Kaduna. It's presently at 75% stage of completion.
There were supposed to be about 36 such facilities, but fewer than half were ever completed, and those that were, never more than half filled. This one was started 20 years ago, says Guido Ferretti, whose Italian firm was hired to finish it.
I believe it was awarded in 89, 90, and construction started here in 91 and stopped in 92 due to some various problems. Some of the materials were missing, and since then it has been in a state of non-completion until recently when it was re-awarded.
It's one more symbol of a government flush with oil revenues that lost its bearings, says Sebo Nanono.
The reality of the situation is the easy money that we get from the oil industry has created more problems than solutions. That we became virtually a consumer nation rather than a productive nation. And that what culminated into huge imports of virtually rice, even maize, and also imports of all other luxury items.
He says oil revenues went to buy everything that should have been made or grown here. Policies that urbanized the country, even built a whole new capital city, Abuja. Thomas Odemwingie is with the non-government group Action Aid.
A lot of the able-bodied people, who otherwise were involved in agriculture, now headed for the cities. The local people, what do they have to show for the big dams? Their poverty, their situation never changes.
Who made the money with all these dams?
Who made the money? The private, contractors who got the contract to build the dams. And most of them are foreign. They are foreign, firms.
There are glimmers of hope that things are turning around in a country that only in the last decade or so has moved from military to democratic rule. Guido Ferretti points out that projects like this silo are finally being completed.
And it's the first time in so many years that we are hearing that they want to increase capacity and they want to boost agriculture, and of course we have to believe them until we are proven wrong.
Farmer Yusuf Suleiman, a member of the ruling party, is betting things will turn around, that government will become more responsive. He's investing in a dry season crop for the first time in years.
The Minister of Water Resources was in Jibia about 4 weeks ago on this project. And he made a pledge that the government is going to supply all the facilities that are required for this irrigation farming.
You're prepared to bet that this government will deliver the water you need this winter?
Inshallah, by the grace of God.
It's critical for the larger region that farmers like Suleiman succeed, that Nigeria begins to meet more of its own food needs. With its large population and oil revenues, there's widespread fear that Nigeria will increasingly crowd out its smaller, impoverished neighbors from the region's food market.
Finally tonight, in the Southeast Asian nation of Thailand, a new round of political turmoil. There was calm with an underlying tension in Thailand's capital today as police and military maintained a state of emergency. They remain out in force after days of mass demonstrations and violence roiled Bangkok and the countryside. Fighting between anti-government demonstrators and police have left 2 dead and more than 100 wounded. Officials are now trying to round up protest organizers. Most embarrassing for Prime Minister Apisit Chachiwa was the cancellation of an Asian summit, after the summit site in a rural resort was invaded by thousands of demonstrators. These demonstrators are called the Red Shirts, and early this week in Bangkok, thousands of them threw rocks and burned vehicles. The Prime Minister himself narrowly escaped when his car was attacked.
If the demonstrators ask for acceptable demands, they can have them, and the government is ready to listen. But they have no right to break the rule of law, especially if that affects other people's rights. So I ask you to stop this action. If you don't, the government has to use its power under the state of emergency.
The Red Shirts are supporters of the deposed Prime Minister Thaksin Shinawatra, a multi-millionaire populist who was twice elected, mainly with support from the rural poor, but who was ousted in a 2006 coup. He's been in exile avoiding a corruption trial. This week, the Thai government revoked his passport and accused him of encouraging these protests. As the Bangkok streets were cleaned yesterday, the sitting prime minister said the red shirt leaders would face justice.
The operation under the state of emergency is not over. There are still things to do. I insist the government will remain vigilant.
The current government came to power on the backs of its own popular uprising late last year, when yellow-shirted demonstrators lay siege to the Bangkok airport, shutting it down for a week. This group, made up of royalists, military, and the Bangkok elite, forced 2 prime ministers to step down before the demonstrations ended. Then, as now, the Thai economy suffers. This week's clashes, along with the airport shutdown in November, are expected to reduce tourism revenue by fully 1/3, nearly $5.6 billion.
It's terrible because everything that happened was shown around the world, so no one's going to come on holiday.
The Thai leadership and political protesters are once again reminding the world that a country thought of as a peaceful resort haven has a long history of military coups and political violence. For more on all this, we turn to two veteran Thailand watchers. They are Kevin Hewison. He's director of the Carolina Asia Center at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And Richard Donor, associate professor of political science at Emory University. Thank you both for joining us. Richard Donor, to you first. Who are these protesters? Who are the people in the red shirts? And then who are those in the yellow shirts who last November, December disrupted the last government?
The yellow shirts who have been protesting the last few weeks, basically, as your report said, at one level are supporters of ex-Prime Minister Thaksin Shinawatra, but more deeply they are largely people from the rural areas.
Excuse me,
the
you
red
said
shirts,
yellow.
I'm sorry, the red shirts. Thank you. The red shirts are largely from the countryside and reflect a couple of levels of frustration. One is they reflect the fact that Thailand, even though it has developed at fairly high rates of growth, has suffered increasing levels of inequality, especially between Bangkok and the countryside. Second, Thaksin was able to tap into those frustrations and win significant elections. He was deposed, as your report said, by a military coup. So another source of frustration for the red shirt demonstrators is the fact that, in their view, democracy has been violated by the military coup and subsequent opposition to Thaksin or pro-Thaksin politicians, leaders who have been elected through democratic means.
So, Kevin Hewison, I read one comment today that said basically this is a feud between the rural poor and the urban rich. Is it as simple as that?
Well, no, of course it's not as simple as that, but that's an interesting way to characterize it. And the ballast of the red shirts are probably people from the poorer sections and previously disenfranchised parts of the community, whereas the yellow shirts represent the conservative elements and authoritarian elements of Thailand in the past, both people close to the palace and also within the military, and the largely urban middle class that has been supportive of those groups, at least in recent years.
Kevin Hewison, Thailand's a population of what I saw today, 63 million people. How much of the population do these sides, these groups that are protesting represent?
Well, it's very difficult to tell. What we do know is that the country is deeply divided. We could probably also say that many ordinary Thais are probably sick to death of the protests which have been going on for months and even years now. But if we look at the last election in December 2007, we see that the people supporting pro-Thaksin parties and what we today call the red shirts are congregated mainly in the poorer northeast and north of the country, and also the working class enclaves, factory areas that encircle Bangkok. And that's probably the people who are supporting the red shirts at the moment. The urban middle class generally supports the yellow shirts, and there's a strong support for the Democrat Party, which leads the government at the moment in the south of the country.
Richard Donor, what is this fight over? I mean, obviously over power, but to what extent is democracy at stake here?
Democracy is pretty key to this whole thing, especially as it taps into the fact that a leader who was democratically elected was overthrown through non-democratic means. So the people from, as Kevin said, the people from the north and the northeast who supported Thaksin feel that their rights have effectively been violated by by the overthrow of democratically elected governments. There is a demand to return to some degree to a 1997 constitution, by the red shirts. On the other hand, the yellows have argued that, in fact, the people of the countryside, the farmers, small business folks in the countryside, especially the North and the Northeast, can't be trusted, that they are naive, they have been taken in by Thaksin's policies, and they can't be trusted, and therefore they have, some of the yellow shirts have effectively proposed a revision of the Constitution so that the legislature, the parliament, would be composed significantly of people who were not democratically directly elected, but who would be appointed. So there's a real difference in terms of, go ahead.
I was going to, let me just quickly interrupt you and ask you, what are the prospects for consensus, do you think?
The prospects of consensus depend, I think that they're relatively low at this point. And I think they depend to some degree on the degree of autonomy, independence, flexibility of the current Prime Minister, Apisit. There is a hope that these demonstrations will push him to reach out, to resist any kind of anti-democratic shift, revision of Constitution, etc. But his autonomy is suspect. It's unclear, in part because he came to power in large part, or a significant part, through the support of the military. And so part of the question is, what will the military do?
And Kevin Hewison, how do you see the prospects for consensus, and what's at stake for the country and for the rest of Asia, for that matter?
Well, I agree with what Rick has said. The prospects, and I'm probably more pessimistic than he is, the prospects for any kind of consensus are very slim. The current Prime Minister talks a lot about consensus and bringing the country together, reconciliation, but he does very little in practice to make that come about. So I think that, and he also owes his allegiance and his position to the military. So I think the chances for reconciliation are pretty slim. Thailand used to be a beacon of democratic government in Southeast Asia. It doesn't look like that anymore.
Richard Donor, is that pretty much what's at stake here? The stability of this country going forward as one of the only real democracies in that part of the world?
Yeah, there's a great fear now. The Economist several months ago wrote an editorial in which they expressed the fear that Thailand would go the direction of kind of a tragic comic country like the Philippines at least used to be. Now, there are some added problems here that may exacerbate this political instability, and that is the economic situation. Thailand has thrived for many years, and in fact it emerged fairly strong out of the '97 financial crisis through dynamic exports. That is no longer a feasible option. Exports used to be 30% of Thailand's GDP. They are now 60%. If they can't export, there are going to be larger numbers of people unemployed, and that creates a more volatile situation.
All right, gentlemen, we are going to have to leave it there. Richard Donor, thank you very much. Kevin Hewison, thank you both.
You're welcome.
Again, the major developments of the day. This was the last day to file tax returns or extensions, and there were protests against taxes and government spending in many places. And pirates from Somalia threatened to hijack more U.S. ships and kill Americans. And a reminder, you can find us online at our one-stop address, newshour.pbs.org. Tonight, you can read a profile of the new U.S.-Mexico border czar and find multimedia coverage of the border troubles from KPBS San Diego. Link to more reports about food insecurity on the Pulitzer Center website. And learn more about Planet Forward, a new web-driven program on PBS about the search for national energy policy. Here's a sample.
In many ways, Ainsworth is a lot like your average Midwestern town. Probably pretty similar to most towns along Nebraska's Highway 20. But there's something else in Ainsworth, something that makes it a little different than the rest of them, something that could be the key to our economy's revival.
Well, you know, we heard about this thing for a number of years before it became reality, and In my personal opinion, it was an interesting deal to have an economic impact to our community, which it had a very good economic impact.
Planet Forward airs tonight on most PBS stations. Check your local listings for the time. We'll see you online and again here tomorrow evening. I'm Judy Woodruff. Thank you and good night.
Major funding for the NewsHour with Jim Lehrer is provided by Intel, supporting math and science education for tomorrow's innovators. Chevron. And by Grant Thornton. The Atlantic Philanthropies. And with the ongoing support of these institutions and foundations. And
this program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
You get our employee price, plus a $1,500 cash allowance, plus a no extra charge dual DVD system, which all adds up to almost $6,500 in savings on a new Chrysler Town & Country. Plus, well-qualified buyers get 0% financing, all on top of our best-in-the-business lifetime powertrain warranty, giving you even more value and peace of mind. See your Chrysler and Jeep dealer today.
It's American Idol winner Taylor Hicks in Grease. Direct from Broadway, it's Time Magazine's #1 musical of the year, featuring all those songs that you love.
April 21st through the 26th at Keller Auditorium. Tickets available at all Ticketmaster outlets or call 503-790-ARTS. Welcome by Fred Meyer and K2.
At Spirit Mountain, it's time for celebration. Use your Coyote Club card and earn chances daily to win cash or prizes, including a 2009 Mercedes. Over $115,000 in cash and prizes to be won. Then join us on May 23rd in celebrating the grand opening of Raindrops Nightclub and the Mountain View Sports Bar. Plus, Kool and the Gang in concert. It's all happening at Spirit Mountain Casino, Northwest's premier entertainment destination.
Dr. Jerry Darm discusses laser lift, available now at Aesthetic Medicine.
The laser lift is the signature procedure here at Aesthetic Medicine. We have worked for years and years to perfect this procedure. After the laser lift, you'll feel better, you'll look better, and you'll be ready to face the world.
With over 30,000 successful procedures, discover for yourself why Aesthetic Medicine has grown to become one of the largest medical spas on the West Coast. Call today for a free consultation or visit online at drdarm.com.
3 rooms of carpet for just $599. Dial 503 Carpets.